Well, we all know that riding a bicycle is not without risks. You can fall, you can crash, you can get injured, of course. But who would have thought that you can also end up with fever, diarrhea, a stomach ache, and even end up in the hospital just from participating in a bike race? Well, and this is actually not a single isolated story. It has actually happened several times already, that after the races, many participants fell ill with bacterial infections. Yeah, and the surprising part is this: it wasn't the food or the drinks that were provided at the event. Yeah. So in this video, I want to share with you a few real examples where this has happened, and I would like to explain the causes behind these infections and also some simple things that can be done to prevent these things from happening again in the future. So hi, hello and welcome, Microbehunter here, I'm Oliver, and in this channel I want to explore how microorganisms shape our everyday lives. And let's start off with a concrete example. It was in Canada in the year 2007. There was a mountain bike race called the Test of Metal. Yeah, it was in British Columbia in Canada. It's a tough 67-kilometer race, and after a few days after the race, many riders started complaining online about an upset stomach, diarrhea, general feeling of illness. And at first, it sounded a little bit like a random food poisoning, so maybe if they've eaten something that was not okay. But within a few days, the public health officials, they started to realize that something bigger was going on here, because they questioned 537 bike racers. More participated in the race, but over 500 of them were questioned, and no less than 225 of them reported diarrhea. That's about 42%. That's nearly every second rider ended up sick. So what's going on here, right? But that was not the only case, because a year later in 2008 in Wales in the UK, so on the other side of the planet, yeah, a mountain bike marathon was held. And again, history repeated itself here, because in this case, no less than 161 people of the race started vomiting, had diarrhea, and had health problems after the race. Yeah, and that's not the only time. In 2017, in Norway even, a man called Per Stubban, he was from Trondheim, and he joined a local bike race as well of around 300 participants, and afterwards he spent an entire week in bed because he was ill, and wondering if others had similar problems. He posted a message on Facebook, and the replies came in very quickly that 50 other racers also had similar symptoms. Yeah, even he himself had to be hospitalized, and he needed infusions because of dehydration. Yeah, so I'm really starting to question right now whether sports is really as healthy as everyone says it is, because it's not just biking. In 2012, in Nevada, in the United States, there was a long distance obstacle adventure race. Apparently these are endurance events where participants combine running, trekking, paddling, climbing, yes, in some cases even mountain biking. And out of those racers, 22 ended up with a confirmed gastrointestinal illness. I mean, what's going on here, right? Yeah, you participate in a sport. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be healthy, right? And then you end up becoming sick. Yeah, and one of the things that all of them had in common was that the people had a bacterium infection by the name of the bacterium called Campylobacter. Yeah, that's a microorganism that's very common in the digestive system of animals like sheep and cattle. So it doesn't really also take very much to make a person sick, because fewer than 500 bacterial cells can be enough to cause a disease. And that's actually a comparatively small number. So now, how did all of those participants in the competition, how did they actually get now infected with that bacterium? Well, the explanation is actually also quite simple, and it's not the contaminated food, as I mentioned before, because these races all took place in wet, rainy conditions, and that meant a lot of mud was present, and the mud was splashing all around, all over the place, right? And some reports that I read actually even mentioned and described that some of the racers' faces were completely covered in mud, with only their eyes being visible. I mean, what a mess, really, right? Imagine biking for hours like that. And what happens now if you actually lick your lips, right? Or if you take a sip from your water bottle, well, when your whole face is covered in mud, well, then of course you're also going to swallow some of that mud. And this is actually what happened. The participants of the race, they were swallowing some of the mud. And that's all that it took to become ill. Really, is really mud that dangerous? Well, of course, it depends on the mud, because they tested the mud, and mud itself should not be a problem, really. Kids love to play in the mud, and they're all fine. So what's going on here, right? But in this case, they found very high levels of bacteria, including E. coli bacteria and other coliform bacteria. And those bacteria, the presence of those bacteria actually shows that there is so-called fecal contamination in the mud. So this basically means that sheep and other animals in the area were essentially producing waste, and this is how the bacteria ended up in the mud. So the manure, the waste of those animals, the manure washed onto the trails by the rain, and the bicyclists, they basically splashed it all up again into the faces of the riders, and that's how the bacteria were transferred from the animals to the people who were riding the bicycles, right? So in short, I have to put it very bluntly, I apologize for this, but let's just put it to the point without knowing it. The participants were eating sheep poop. Yeah, it's actually, this is what happened. Now, in the Nevada obstacle course, however, it was not sheep, but it was actually cattle, because the event took place on a cattle ranch, and the mud was contaminated with cattle manure. The same result. It was Campylobacter, which is very widespread in animal feces, and the mud is basically there, the perfect vehicle for that. The mud was warm, it was moist because of the rain, nutrient rich and full of microorganisms here, and essentially these were the ideal conditions for survival. And if you're of course eating this stuff, then you should not be surprised also if you become ill, right? Now, of course, investigations took place, reports were filed. I mean, it's the normal procedure, right? And of course, also recommendations were issued. And yeah, so what they actually said is the following. There were several points that you should adhere to, and honestly, it makes a lot of common sense here. Avoid eating mud, right? Keep your mouths closed during muddy conditions, and use mud guards or fenders on your bicycle to reduce the splashing. But of course, I know that mountain bikers usually don't have them, and race bikers also not, because you want to make sure that you're as light as possible and as fast as possible. But actually, these things would probably help to reduce mud splash. Wash your hands so that you do not eat with dirty hands. I wonder how you're supposed to do that during a bicycle race, right? Rinse your lips before you drink something out of your water bottle. Also kind of difficult to do while you're racing, I can assume. Yeah, and always be cautious with food and water during muddy outdoor events. Yeah, of course, this is all very easily said than done. So there were also recommendations that the organizers of such events should plan ahead and should basically select a route which is free of animals, so that you can reduce the risk of infection. Now, Campylobacter is actually one of the most common bacteria to cause stomach problems worldwide. I researched and found out it's even more common than Salmonella. And in most healthy people, it just basically means a few days of fever, diarrhea, and feeling a little bit miserable, and then you're going to recover. And in some cases, it can be actually more serious, especially for small children, older people, or those people who have a weaker immune system. Of course, they can be hit much harder. And the participants of these events, of course, they were strong athletes, so no problem here. So all of these outbreaks show how easily microorganisms from the environment can reach us, so often even without us noticing. And of course, some prevention makes a big difference here. Well, I'm Oliver. I hope you have a nice day. Hope that you're interested in these videos. And if you are, I would like to, of course, invite you to subscribe to this channel here. Happy microbe hunting as always, and see you around in the next video. Bye-bye.